Hello, Wise Crypto community, and also thank you for having here, guys. And today we'll discuss more about the state finance and state to you guys. Okay, I can see our guest is here actually. Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Hello, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you too.
I can hear you
Okay.
too, loud and clear.
Yeah. Thank you. So just give me a moment, like to ensure that we are in live or not.
Okay, I will mute. You guys just let me know when we're ready.
Okay, I think everything is fine. We can start. And also, yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank you everyone for having here. And also, this is your favorite crypto space, like the Wise Crypto actually. So stay tuned, guys. And today we'll discuss more about this Stead finance. So, like, first of all, I can see here is our honorable guest. Could you please introduce yourself one by one? Jace, could you please introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. So my name is Mitchell Suchner. I am the co-founder of Stead. So we're a DeFi platform. We're going to be launching in the first quarter of 2024 on Arbitrum. And actually, we're very involved with real world assets, as you guys know. We've talked about this before. Uh, so one of the sister companies to Stead that I also helped to co-found was a naval architecture and naval construction company. So they were focusing on floating houses, and we still are, right? That company is still building floating houses, fish cages, things like that. And what Stead is doing is kind of bringing the same liquidity that you find in the blockchain to some of the smaller aquaculture companies and fishermen groups and associations that we've met while we've been operating here in the Philippines. I can go on a little bit more about Stead, but first let me pass it over to Jesse because I think that's my introduction for the time.
Yeah, thank you. Jesse, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Jesse. I'm the community founder. I mean, the community manager for Stead. I basically handle Twitter. I also handle Discord, and I also handle community relations for Stead DeFi over on um, Twitter and Discord.
Okay, yeah, happy to know about yourself actually. So, like, guys, Stead is a platform that's designed to bring much needed liquidity to the global ship and also floating infrastructure market actually. And also, I can say they're working on it now, and their vision is to clear like to all floating infrastructure, including. But I can say they're trying to make more secure infrastructure on that actually. So yeah, thank you. So, like already you mentioned a little bit about this. Could you say more about the state action and also could you say some of your achievement actually, and also which stage you're working now currently?
Did you say which jurisdictions we're working in? Well, as far as sorry, as far as jurisdictions, so we're going to be launching at launch. We'll be primarily operating within the Philippines. So we're basing ourselves in the Philippines for a handful of reasons. One of the reasons is that it's actually one of the largest markets in the world for boat construction. A lot of people don't know this, but a lot of the people that work on cruise liners and the people that work on ships, like merchant marine groups and things like that, a lot of the labor pool globally that comes into the shipping industry comes from the Philippines, right? And it's not just the labor pool, the skilled sailors coming from the Philippines and working for different companies and different organizations around the world, but a lot of the boats, the world ships, especially fishing boats, are built disproportionately in the Philippines. It's a net exporter of boats and ships. Now, usually those are in the fiberglass category. Some of them are steel, but in either situation, there is a lot of expertise when it comes to shipbuilding in this country. Actually, there's actually more ships that are built and exported from the Philippines than the United States, which a lot of people don't realize. But so as I said before, The floating infrastructure that we were building, that our sister company was building, is it's currently happening in a place called Boracay. So it's a place called Boracay Island, and some of the resorts that we're talking to there are interested and have been interested in building a kind of a full floating resort. And so when we started working on this project to build these floating houses, and talking to these companies about building a floating resort, the ideas came in to work on like a funding platform where we could help to bring in capital that would help with these projects.
Oh
Back to you,
yeah, got
Austin.
it. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So yeah, like they have their long-term goal actually, as you mentioned. So I can see state was created to bring the liquidity and much needed access to the capital to developing the countries and also to have the small business grow actually. So yeah, their platform was also originally like dreamed up with a lot of people wishing to build the floating houses such as houseboats and also states and like to have access to the alternative ways to fund their homes actually. So yeah, thank you. Happy to know about this process. Actually, I really appreciate that, and also, so let's talk more about your token. Like, could you say how you do like ensure the state token returns actually?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yes, like how would you ensure the state token returns, and also then you can say about your tokenomics and the utilities.
Oh, the token returns. Okay. Yeah. So the way that Stead works is a group will come to us and they will say that we need a certain asset. So, for example, if a fishing company comes to us, they're going to say we need a fishing boat, for example. And so we would then provide the capital for that fishing boat. So let's say that they need a tuna fishing boat. So once we allow people to mint tokens on our platform, that we would take the stable coins used in the process of minting those tokens. We would use those to buy the fishing boat. Then the company that's going to use that fishing boat is going to rent time with it in the same way that you might, for example, go to a concert. You would buy a ticket, and then that concert kind of rents your time at that concert. So you're allowed to stay there for a certain amount of time, right? The Stead tokens that were minted initially in that minting process are then purchased back by the operator of the fishing boat and then used when they're burned. It qualifies as using tickets to rent time with that asset. After enough tickets have been burned in this lease to own program, they will then own the asset at the end of that period. And so the rate at which these tickets are burned is set in such a way that the monetary value, the dollar value of the tickets that are burned, ends up being greater than the dollar value of tickets that were minted initially. So the idea is that if you mint Stead tokens and you hold on to even a single token for a certain amount of time, that the rate of deflation of those tokens over time will guarantee a certain increase in price, a certain increase in the valuation of the token. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And also, I think in the previous email we covered a lot of about their tokenomics and also their use case actually. So if people you can check out their website to learn more actually, and also join their Twitter. And also, I'd like to ask our listener, please ask your question on our Binance comment segment with your Twitter ID so that we can find it out. And also, you can start asking now actually. Then I will choose some question from there. So yeah, thank you for describing about your tokenomics and others. So yeah, like I can see state tokens are minted in order to the fund, the construction or acquisition of the floating asset and the floating infrastructure. So people you can collect their token also, and also you can make your own research. So I'd like to know like how to make your state DeFi project successful in future. Actually, like what is your plan on that, and also how would you promote the project in your local community or outside of your country?
That's a good question. Thank you, Austin. So, in terms of promoting it locally in the local area, we actually have our own boats that we're using right now, and in the process of acquiring those boats and using those boats for tuna fishing, because we want to have experience in the field, and we do have a lot of experience in the field that we're operating in. We know many other fishermen associations, many other groups here in the Philippines and in Indonesia and other countries that we plan expanding into. And we simply make contact with them. We have some communication with those groups, and we ask them, do you want to be an operator? And we explain what that entails. And actually, any group or individual that wants to be an operator, that wants to benefit from the Stead funding process, can also contact us on our website. So that being the case, as long as we have an inflow of operators, an inflow of people who want to use these floating assets at a profit, who want to use them successfully, then we have a continuous flow of floating infrastructure. We have a continuous burn of these tokens. And so in the long term, the token continues to be deflationary. So actually a lot of projects are looking at the 5 day, the 1 week, the 1 month time span, when a lot of people are looking at price graphs, when a lot of people are talking about how their tokenomics are going to work. In some projects they'll talk about like a pump, and they'll talk about the tokenomics being this or that. In our case, we have a very long term view of our tokenomics. So for example, these operators, these people that operate these fishing boats, when they come to us and they sign an agreement, and there will be legal agreements with these groups that they will continue to burn tokens for a certain period of time, those agreements are measured in years. And most agreements will be either 1 year, 2, 3, or 5 years. Some agreements might even be 10 years. So what you have is a very long-term setup for a very stable price increase, and also a token that is collateralized by real-world assets. And so it's very set apart from things like meme coins. It's a totally different game. It's a totally different way of doing tokenomics, a way that's a lot more stable and a lot more likely to grant a stable increase in value.
Yeah, thank you. And also, I believe that it will build a fully floating city can unlock the future of innovation. Actually, I really appreciate that. So let's talk more about like how your state finance is positioning itself as a first more mover in the particularly interesting of raw technology.
Sure. So one of the things that we're doing is we're actually helping to fund projects that are cutting edge, that are green, that are so there's something called polyculture. I can talk for a second about polyculture. Of the aquaculture groups that are looking to acquire fish cages from us, we are receiving a lot of requests. We've actually received a request for about $500,000 worth of fish cages that are called hexafarms. So these hexafarms, this is a type of fish cage where the fish that are in the middle of the cage are surrounded by a ring of seaweed. And then there's this kind of other net that sort of wraps around the bottom of the cage where you can also grow shrimp at the same time. And the idea is that the seaweed puts oxygen into the water, and the oxygen increases fish growth. The fish put out waste into the water, which accumulates as biofouling on the inner net and the outer net of the system. And then the shrimp actually eat biofouling, so that becomes a food source for them. So polyculture is kind of like this concept that we're going to take these different organisms that normally fulfill different roles within a food chain, and we're going to design a structure that maximizes their synthesis with each other, their mutually beneficial relations with each other. And so you end up with a fish cage that's growing fish, and it's growing shrimp, and it's growing seaweed, and it's growing them in larger quantities, and it's doing it more sustainably in the long term and putting out less pollution, because again, the shrimp are consuming that fish waste as a source of food. So you have less pollution going out into the water, less oxygen deprivation. It's actually adding oxygen into the water, which is a net benefit on fish populations near this structure in the water. So these are one of the structures these are one of the floating assets that people have requested funding for specifically. They've said, we want to get this. If we can get this asset, then we are going to lease it for such and such amount of time. So I believe the request we had for the $500,000 worth of these fish cages was for about 5 years. And over that period of time, I might be doing the math wrong here, so I don't have it right in front of me, but I think that over that course of time, in the process of them leasing those assets, they would burn somewhere in the neighborhood of like $800,000 or $900,000 worth of the token. So what happens is you mint $500,000 worth of the token, and you burn almost $1 million worth of the token. And in the process, you're propping up these small businesses, you're turning them into medium businesses or large businesses, and so you're helping the local economy, and you're helping the ecosystem, and you're proving stable and sustainable yield on these tokenomics. So that's kind of just an example of one of the projects that we're supporting, but there are other projects like it as well.
Yeah, yeah, got it. Thank you for that. And also, I saw like people are commenting on our space. So nothing to worry, guys. I will choose then. Like we have to go for the Twitter. So yeah, here's the last question from the introductory part. Like, despite the growth opportunities in the floating infra market, acquiring the loans such as the project, especially in the developing countries, is quite difficult to compare to acquire the mortgage for the houses, properties, etc. So how did you solve this problem actually?
Yes, actually, that's exactly one of the reasons why we initially wanted to build this platform. So, kind of going back to, I had been working with a company that was building floating houses. And the idea behind these floating houses were that we're going to go to these beach resorts. Now, they can't expand, right? Because all the beachfront is already taken up. So, the only way that they can expand is that they can build a floating house in the water. They can put that up on Airbnb, and now they've increased their revenue as a resort. And you have this new kind of floating Airbnb. It's a very, very cool concept. And for resorts, that's really not too much of a problem because a lot of resorts have enough money to afford that kind of thing. But what if someone wants to buy a floating house and live in it as like their main home or maybe as a vacation home? For a lot of people, you're going to look at acquiring a mortgage for a floating house. But if you're going for a floating house, mortgages are a lot more tricky. It's already difficult to get a mortgage in some locations around the world in order to acquire a regular house. When the house is on the water, it becomes significantly more difficult to acquire a mortgage. And so that's one of the reasons that we decided, hey, if we create this platform where you raise the capital and then you lease the floating house for a certain amount of time, and you can acquire some sort of a lease to own agreement, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 20 years, it's basically fulfilling the same role as a mortgage, but it's not a mortgage. The way that it works is fundamentally different because it's using tickets. It's you're burning tickets. You're using tickets to lease time. Again, in the same way you'd lease time to go to a concert. You're leasing time with to utilize an asset. So when we talked about this business model to some of the other companies that are operating in the area here in the Philippines, where we're located right now, they were telling us that, yeah, it is difficult to get a mortgage. It's actually difficult to get funding for a lot of small businesses, especially those that are in the aquacultural sector or the fishing sector. And so because that can be difficult, especially in developing countries that are undercapitalized. In a country like the Philippines, there's not enough banks, there's not enough bank branches. The banks don't have enough money to give out loans to small businesses. So you need something else that isn't a loan. You need some other group to come in and fulfill this role. In a lot of cases, it's Chinese backed or Korean backed loan companies. And the prevailing market rate on loans from those companies is actually very, very high. It can be 30%, 40%, 50% per year. It's a very, very high rate. So small businesses are kind of stuck in the situation. But then if you look at these lease to own abilities, if you look at these tickets, these rental tickets that you can use on a boat, it provides another ability for these fishermen and these aquaculture companies to grow their inventory of assets without needing to take out a loan. And so the result is that they're willing to pay a good amount of money on leasing these assets, more actually than people would be willing to pay in America because the prevailing rate over here is very high. But it's also, there's also a lot of groups that are lining up to utilize this system because again, you can't just walk into a bank and get a loan in countries that are undercapitalized, and that's where blockchain steps in. Blockchain is a lot of capital. There's not a lot of real world assets backing that capital, and in developing countries there's a lot of real world assets, but there's not enough capital backing those assets. So blockchain operating in developing countries is not at all surprising. It makes a lot of sense. And maybe it's part of the reason as well why blockchain is so popular in places like Nigeria and South Africa. So those are also locations that we would probably look into expanding into in the very early stages. So I think do you have any other aspect to that question? Go ahead, Austin.
Yeah, thank you, got it. Thank you for answering all the questions from the introductory part, and also people definitely like joined our community. So yeah, it's time to take some question from the X space actually I got previously. Hope that you're ready.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so here is the first question. Like many projects are now talking about their exchange while the price of their tokens or coins is always going down. So, as one of the leaders of the state DeFi, will you dare tell me the difficulties it's facing and also how long it takes to overcome them?
Right. So when it comes to real world assets and their price declining against the asset that backs them, there could be a few reasons why that might be the case. Um, so, for example, if you have a token and it's backed by carbon credits, uh, those carbon credits, they're there, but how are they being utilized to interact with the token? How is a token being propped up by the real world assets that back it? So, in our case, the way that our system works is once you have a real world asset, let's say a tuna fishing boat, and there's a lot of tuna in the Philippines and Indonesia, Malaysia, and all around Southeast Asia. Yellowfin tuna is probably one of the most common fish around here, and it's a very valuable fish, especially when it's exported to other markets like China or the U.S. But I digress. So the point is when you mint a Stead token and that the money that came from that mint will not go into some wallet. It will not go into some treasury that in the future we're going to acquire a real world asset, or we're going to acquire a real world asset, but it's not going to directly interact with the token. What happens when you mint a Stead token is it goes directly into the real world asset, directly into the tuna fishing boat. And then the operator, the people that are using that tuna fishing boat to turn a profit, are going to then buy back and burn the Stead tokens. So basically, the profits that are derived from that initial minting of the Stead token go right back into the token again. And again, they're going in by burning the token. So it's deflating the token. It's causing the token price to go up. And so what you're going to see is the way our tokenomics is laid out, and we'll actually come up with a chart to show this on our social media account later, is you're going to have this kind of incremental price increase, like a step, like, at this month we would expect the price to be here. At this month, we expect the price to be here. We're kind of building like a semi-stable coin where it's going to have a very linear growth in line with the assets that back it. So they're very palpably affecting the tokenomics, affecting the price of the token itself. Unlike, again, some projects that claim to be RWA projects will mint the token, and at the time of mint there is no asset. But in our case, that's not true. The assets exist. At least some of the assets exist even before the token is minted, and then as more tokens are minted, more assets will come online, and they'll be operated by more small companies.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think Hook asked the question. You got your answer. Thank you for this. And there is another question. Like the current market is quite active, but in the future there may be a downtrend market situation. So, what has the team prepared so that their project can still develop will even in the market goes down in future?
Right, that's a good question. So again, if we're talking about real world assets backing a token, and in this case it's floating assets, it's fishing boats that produce a profit by catching tuna, it's fish cages that produce a profit usually by not growing tuna. They're usually growing tilapia or milkfish or sometimes salmon in colder waters, things like that, right? So you have a real world asset that is actively turning a profit, and they're producing a commodity. And commodities like fish or shrimp or seaweed. A lot of markets, seaweed isn't considered very much of a commodity, but in Southeast Asia, at least around here, seaweed is commonly used both as a food and also in some industrial capacities like cosmetics and things like that. So, anyways, you have these tokens that are minted. The capital from the minting process of those tokens goes into these real world assets. So, what happens if the market dips? If the market dips, if Bitcoin is at $80,000 and it drops down to $40,000, let's say, then you would expect the rest of the prices of all the other tokens in the market, they're going to follow suit. Ethereum is going to drop with it. Monero is going to drop with it. Litecoin is going to drop with it. Assuming Litecoin is still as popular as it is now, and I think that it will be. I do like Litecoin. There haven't been many changes in a very long time. But anyways, what would our token do? What would Stead do? Why is Stead different? Well, it's different because again, the assets that already exist that are in the water that are generating a profit, according to a contract, a several year contract, a 5-year contract maybe, or a 10-year contract, those assets are going to keep uh, using the token, using the Stead token to lease time, or rather, the operators are going to keep using the Stead token to lease time with that asset to continue turning a profit with it. And so, because of that, whether or not the crypto market goes down, the value, the price of Stead goes up. If the crypto market goes up, Stead goes up. If the crypto market goes down, Stead goes up. Again, it doesn't follow the market trends. So it's akin to a stable coin in that sense, in that it's a more it's kind of like a safe haven for gains that you might have already made in the market, but it's also going to be going up at a constant trajectory. So it's better, it's preferable to putting your money in stable tokens, in stable coins. Why would you put your money in USDT? Why would you put your money in USDC if you can hold on to Stead, which is going up at a rate that we've set at about 10.8%? And again, this depends on the contract and this depends on the rate of burn, but 10.8% increase in value annually is what we expect for the token, because that's going to be, again, based on this kind of set predetermined rental burn rate. So it's a very high yield. If you looked at it as a yield, it would be a very, very high APY compared to bonds or even the stock market on an average year. And it can continue to do that even in a bear market. So I think that if you have made some money off of Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of these other meme coins that are out there, if you want to pull that money out and put it into stable coins, put it into Stead instead. Put it into Stead. It's a preferable place to put your money in is what I would say to that.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think like you're working behind this project, and also I think they have a great team members. So they are like I think they will observe the situations and nothing to worry about this. So I think they will like achieve their desired goal within their time period actually. So yeah, thank you for answering the question. So here is another question I got. Like, state supports the development of the cutting edge seasteading technology. So, and also what specific advancement or the breakthrough has the state contributed to? And are there any ongoing research or development projects aimed at the pushing the boundaries of floating infrastructure?
Yes, that's a very good question. Thank you. So, like I've talked about before, most of the people that are coming to us and wanting to use our platform to secure capital to buy more fish cages, fishing boats, or in some cases, floating houses, most of the groups that are coming to us are looking for more traditional aquaculture, and that is true. But we're also going out of our way to support some of these new emerging technologies like polyculture, which I previously talked about, where you take multiple different aquatic organisms, you put them into a single structure, in this case a fish cage that has different chambers or different compartments for different species, and you allow them to interact with each other in a productive way. That's an emerging technology. Polyculture is an emerging technology that is going to dramatically increase the efficiency of the aquaculture sector. It's going to lead to faster growth for fish, healthier fish, less fatalities, larger fish at harvest time, and it's going to produce seaweed and shrimp basically for free at the same time. So those hexafarms that I talked about, that polyculture technology, is one of the things that our platform, our DeFi platform, is trying to also invest some of its money into. Where we want to prop up these emerging technologies because they are more efficient and they are more profitable even than traditional technologies, and they're also more sustainable and they're more green. So some of the other technologies that we're trying to that we're fans of, that we would advocate for, would be floating houses or seasteads. So floating houses that are meant to go in open ocean, that are meant to go in, handle large waves, that are meant to survive even in rough weather conditions. Those are usually called seasteads, and it's kind of a combination of the word homestead and, well, sea, right? So sea plus homestead is seastead. And the idea is that you can take a house, you can put it out here in rough weather in the water, and it's going to last 50 years or 100 years, and there's not going to be some storm that's going to come along and destroy it. So when you have floating assets that can last that long, they're treated more like real estate. We expect them to be valued somewhat similar to real estate. For example, if you had a house that's on the beach, you expect that in 20 years the value of that house is going to go up. If you have a boat that's anchored near the beach, its value might not necessarily go up because boats need a lot of repair, they need a lot of maintenance, they're going to fall apart over a certain period of time. So these beach resorts that we want to help them fund these floating houses that they've reached out to us and requested this before. The floating houses in question aren't necessarily made out of thin fiberglass or even made out of steel. They're made out of these other materials. They have these other alternative designs that make them a lot more stable in rough waves, that make them a lot more durable, a lot more long lived. And so what you end up with is imagine a boat or imagine a really it looks like a house. If you can see my profile picture here, I have a picture of some of these floating houses. It looks like a house almost on stilts, but it's actually free floating in the water. It's not touching the ground. Imagine that anchored near to the shore. If it does not require a lot of maintenance, if it doesn't have a very limited lifespan, but you expect it to still be here in 100 years, performing and functioning exactly like it did 100 years prior, without need for any considerable maintenance, really minimal maintenance at all, then it's going to be treated as an asset more like real estate. So now imagine you've got that boat, you've got it anchored near to the shore. 20 years later, instead of having a lower value because the boat's falling apart, it's in perfect condition. It's going to have a higher value. So it's one of the few instances where you can put money into a boat and instead of costing you money, it's going to become an asset. It's going to become something that goes up in value over time. A lot of people think of boats as an expense, but some floating infrastructure, especially fish cages, but also floating houses, are assets. It's not just that they can produce a profit, but they in themselves can go up in value over time. And so that's one of the things that I'm really a fan of floating infrastructure for that reason. Um, I guess one of the most obvious cases of this is docks and piers and wharfs. But those are really land structures because they're still connected to the ground. But just so people are aware, not all floating infrastructure is something that depreciates. Some floating infrastructure does appreciate in value.
Yeah, definitely. But I really appreciate your project actually. It's very interesting, I can say. Yeah, as far I know, if people take any kind of loan and also when they repay, I think they will get their proper ownership. Is that?
Well, it depends. So if they're going to be again, it's not really a loan, right? What's happening is someone's coming to us. They're saying, "I need this particular floating asset," and then we're using crowdfunding on the blockchain to acquire that asset, and then giving them the ability to lease it by kind of using up tickets by burning Stead tokens. So in most cases, and especially with small companies, the terms of that lease would be lease to own. So it's functionally very similar to a loan, although it's definitely distinct from a loan. So it's not a loan. But regardless, yes, it is something that some of the fishing associations in the area where we're operating have looked at it as this is a way that we can grow our company. And that's certainly what they have in mind. We've received, I think to date, something like 30 or 40 letters of intent, all of them requesting, the largest one requesting $500,000 in fish cages, but all of them requesting a certain amount of funding for a certain asset. So yeah, part of the reason we want to be here is really to help small businesses grow as well.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. And also here is two more question. How I need to ask from the Axis Space. So here is another one. The collateralization of real estate tokens with the real world asset is a key feature. So can you provide a detailed explanation of how this process work and the measures in the place ensure the transparency and security of this collateralization?
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good question. Thank you for asking. So, to who asked that? So, the way that it works is this, right? On our website, on the front end, which I think actually a lot of the documents we're going to have will be hosted on IPFS, but most people will just go to our website. They will go to the marketplace page, which I believe is not live right now because we're not close enough to launch yet. But when you see the marketplace page, what it is it's a marketplace of the different floating assets that we have been requested to fund. So when you go in to inspect one of those assets, let's say that you want to buy or mint some Stead tokens. What you're going to see is pictures of the asset in question. Like again, if it's a boat they want to buy that's already been built, you'll see pictures of the boat. If not, you'll see schematics, drawings, maybe a blueprint, or maybe a picture of a similar boat that was produced by the same shipyard to give you kind of an estimation of, okay, this is where the money's going. This is the floating asset that's that will be in question, or at least a very, very similar floating asset of the same dimensions. It's very much like it. Then we'll also be showing the business that's going to be operating that boat. Then we're going to show the contract, and that lease contract, or that lease to own contract, will clearly state, here is the asset in question. Here's how long we plan to lease it for. Here's how much we're going to burn every 30 days. And these burns will be in increments of every 30 days. Here's how much we'll burn every 30 days. And here's how many months or years we'll burn it for. And if we lean towards these longer term contracts, like a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract or even a 10-year contract, then you're going to be able to very accurately predict this is going to be the circulating supply of the token. And we'll show this on our website. This is going to be the circulating supply of the token at a certain point in time. These are going to be the boats and the floating houses and the other floating assets that are collateralizing the token. And this is how much money, this is how many tokens those assets are going to contribute toward burning. So we know the burn rate, we know the circulating supply, and we know all of the not just the floating assets themselves, but even the companies that are operating the floating assets. And we're conducting thorough background checks. We make sure that the companies have all of their permits and their licenses in order. We make sure that they're registered with the local government units. We make sure that they do not have any other loans or any liens on any of their other properties or any kind of outstanding debts that they need to pay, to make sure that they are in tip-top shape in order to acquire these assets and be part of our community and part of our ecosystem. So that way we do all of that research for you, so that when you acquire these Stead tokens, you can know this is a debt-free, lien-free, this is a secured real-world asset that we know is profitable and we know is being operated by people that actually know how to use it. So in terms of transparency and security of the project, we're going out of our way in a way that many other projects are not doing.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, got it. And also, people get ready. Here is the last question. Like, he asked about what is the most ambitious goal. I think we already discussed. So you can take this part. Like, I would appreciate it if you could share with us your upcoming updates or plan.
Sure. So when it comes to the upcoming updates, so the first thing that we're doing, the first part of our roadmap, and our roadmap is available on our Discord, and it's also on our X or our Twitter account. But just to share some kind of behind the scenes, besides what's on the roadmap, the first thing we've actually done is we've made sure that the assets that we're acquiring and using to back our token are profitable. So we've already purchased tuna fishing boats. We're already building these polyculture fish cages that are growing fish and shrimp and seaweed and all these other things. And we're building the first floating house in a place called Boracay Island in the Philippines, which is a very well-known and popular international tourist destination. So the first thing we're doing is we're operating these assets ourselves, and then we're going to other companies that have experience in operating the assets and asking them to operate the assets at a profit. And then if for any reason those companies fold or those companies are unable to meet their burn obligation, we would actually be the ones to take back those assets and those floating assets and then use them profitably in order to maintain those burn obligations. So no matter what, there are several layers to fall back on. So we can say, yes, this amount of tokens will be burned. We can guarantee that. And so the step where we're at right now, because we're pre-launch, is we're currently looking for seed funding. We're currently building these floating assets, these fishing boats and these fish cages. We're putting these things in the water as we speak. They're under construction in multiple different locations. And we'll also be finishing up our first security audit soon. Now, I say our first one. We haven't announced a second one, and we may, depending on how the first security audit goes, we may or may not have a second one. But a security audit is currently underway, and it's actually almost completed as well. So we also take the security of our smart contract code very, very seriously, and so we will be talking a lot more about that security audit once it's complete.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for answering all the questions from the Twitter also. So yeah, well, like I can say there is most exciting segment actually like live. And also people don't forget to join and also be part of them. Hope that you will be benefited from there. So thank you. So are you ready to take some question from live actually?
Sure, absolutely. Let's go.
Okay, yeah, I got a couple of questions, like a lot of questions actually. They're so good. So let me choose the best one. Okay, here is about your token. Like, do you offer passive stable coin income? Uh, like to your holders?
That's a very good question. So you can view it like that. If, for example, if you take some USDT or some USDC and you put them on Curve, for example, the first thing you have to do is you have to trust that USDT and USDC are not going to depeg. The next thing you have to do is you have to trust that Curve is also not going to collapse or is not going to get hacked, and that nothing's going to go wrong with their smart contracts. So you're kind of doubling your risk. And why are you doubling your risk when you operate with a stable coin on one of these interest-bearing platforms? You're usually doubling your risk for maybe a 4 or a 5 or an 8% APY. So that's the interest rate that you're getting when you're lending out those stable coins. In our case, it's not so much an interest rate, it's a rate at which the floating assets, the real world assets that exist that back up this coin, are buying back and burning the tokens. And so the first thing you're doing is you're minimizing your risk because you're not having to trust two different protocols. You don't have to trust USDT and Curve at the same time, right? You're only trusting one protocol. You're just trusting the Stead platform. And you can see, again, with transparency, here are the operators that are operating the floating assets. Here are the contracts we have in place. Here are the background checks, and all of that will be made publicly available. So it's actually, more publicly available, I should say, than what Tether has made some of their assets. But I digress. So we plan on being a very transparent, very secure platform. And in terms of what price action will happen to the token, we know that there's going to be a specific price floor because we know that a certain quantity of tokens will be burned, and that quantity will always have to be greater than the amount of tokens that are minted for every item, for every boat, or every other type of asset that's backing the token. So that 10.8% is an estimation. And yes, if you hold on to it, you can view it kind of like a savings account as you would with USDT and Curve, but it would probably be more of a soft peg. It'll probably be, we've used the word semi-stable coin. It could go above that point, but it couldn't go below that point very low, because if it goes below that point, then it's a bit complicated, but basically we have a kind of a minting price where you can mint the price of the token for a certain, basically you can mint Stead token for a certain price. And so that mechanism, which we can talk more about in the future as we get closer to launch, will basically put a floor on the price of the token. And that floor is the price that's ever increasing upwards at about 10.8% per year. But that being said, there's no ceiling on the price of the token. And so it could just go up considerably from there. But if you buy and hold, you are buying something that effectively is kind of like buying a limited number of tickets that are backed by a certain quantity of assets. The assets are growing and the number of tickets is diminishing. So in that sense, it is functioning very similar to an interest-bearing account.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you for answering this. I have to take for more question. So yeah, here is another good question. Like, can you explain okay, just let me okay. So is that possible for a state to create a floating city?
Yeah, this is the question I wanted. So let's talk about this. So the floating houses, these are really, really fascinating things. These floating houses, this is specifically something that the resorts are more interested in. Again, because beach resorts is a very limited amount of coastal property in the world. And so floating houses are a type of floating asset that can increase the amount of real estate, that can increase the amount of human habitable areas on the surface of the planet. So this is actually a big passion of mine. I love these floating houses because the way that they're designed, they are free floating. They are extremely durable, meant to last about 100 years, give or take. And there are different types of floating houses. There's the Sea Pod, there's the ArkPad. There is actually, if you go on like the seasteading subreddits or the seasteading Facebook page, you'll see people that are making designs out of plastic and out of concrete and all kinds of different things. But they generally have the common theme of, this is not a boat that needs a lot of maintenance and repair. This is an asset. This is real estate. This is an appreciating asset. The ones that, the one that we're currently building right now in the Philippines is an ArkPad. And so they're designed to snap together. You can imagine 10 or 20 floating houses. When they connect together, they can share resources between them, like fresh water or electricity or fiber optic cables to have better internet access. So it's kind of like a pre-built grid almost. It's like a power and water grid, right? So you build all these floating houses, they snap together like Legos, and then you have these walkable streets that form in between the floating houses. They're kind of built into the structure of the seastead, and you also have these grids and these systems, and they have their own solar panels for power generation. You have all of these things that are built into it. So the first thing that you need to do is do something safe, like build a floating resort, build it in a coastal area. But I'm definitely of the opinion, and I'm an advocate, that the technology is there to build floating cities in international waters, even in the middle of the ocean. And some people might say, well, why would you want to build a floating city in international waters? And when you look at the regulatory landscape in the United States and Europe and Russia and all these other countries, the regulatory landscape in reference to blockchain companies, I think it's going to improve, but at the current time, it's too restrictive. And and at the same time, it might not improve. It might actually get more restrictive in the future. We don't know. So one of the things we want to do is we want to work with blockchain companies to build one of these floating cities in international waters so that they can base their headquarters in these cities in international waters, and in that way operate within a different and more preferential regulatory framework in reference to blockchain projects. So it's almost as if you're building a new Singapore out of nothing in the middle of, there's no land. It's not even a shallow area. It could be, a kilometer deep of water. And yet the technology is now there these days for us to build these floating cities from the ground up or from the water up, right? So it's one of the projects that we want to help to contribute to in the future, and we want to raise awareness of these types of things, because if Stead is going to be involved in this, there's a lot of benefits to building your own jurisdiction, to building your own city, and kind of creating your own regulatory framework in reference to blockchain in that regard. So it's kind of sci-fi, it's kind of futuristic, but it's absolutely possible. And it's possible with technology that exists right now.
Okay, yeah, thank you for this explanation. I also hope that like in within few days or future, like we will be able to see your floating city. So thank you for this. And also there is another question, like what kind of borrowers are prioritized?
So it depends. Um, our priority would be those with experience. So, for example, if someone comes to us and they say, "I've been tuna fishing for 20 years. I've been doing it. This is my career. I've been the captain of 3 different vessels. I've done this. I've done that. And I've caught hundreds of metric tons of tuna over the course of my career." And that's not unusual. There are very experienced fishermen in the Philippines, in Indonesia, Malaysia, all over Southeast Asia, and they just don't have the capital to buy their own boat. They don't have the ability to get a loan. Some of them don't even have bank accounts because it can be very difficult to get a government ID, and those government IDs are then required in order to open up bank accounts in the first place. So due to a lot of these hurdles that people in first world countries don't think about, there are very experienced, very mature captains of fishing vessels that just cannot have their own fishing vessel. So someone like that, they might go to the front of the line. At the same time, in a large, or rather a mid-sized aquaculture company that's operating 10 fish cages, and they just want the ability to acquire another 20 fish cages this year because they think that fish prices are about to go up, they would be prioritized. People that already have assets or already have a lot of experience are prioritized in the process to receive funding, to receive these lease to own opportunities, um, because they're a safer bet, because we know that they're going to bring value, they're going to bring profit to our platform, to our ecosystem. And so that's why we would prioritize them. But of course, we're open to anybody that wants to be an operator of these floating assets. Anybody that wants to reach out to us can go to our website and they can do so. Or they can reach out to us on our X account. If you're in Southeast Asia, if you want to talk to us, I'd love to hear you out.
Yes, got it, got it. Thank you. So yeah, there is another question, like does your state plan to expand to other blockchains?
Sorry, can you say that one more time, Austin?
Yes, does your state plan to expand to other blockchain? Like, do you have any kind of plan to move on the other blockchain?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay, so at launch, we'll be on Arbitrum. And Arbitrum right now is the biggest L2 in terms of DeFi liquidity, in terms of total value locked within the DeFi ecosystem. Arbitrum is kind of the place to be. But we are looking at partnerships with other platforms, and those partnerships will probably determine what L2s or what other blockchains we plan to expand to next. So Avalanche could definitely be in the works. ZK Sync could definitely be in the works. We're not committing to anything right now, but more than likely we would expand to EVM chains. We would expand to probably L2s for the Ethereum network. I don't see us expanding into anything like Algorand or Solana. We likely won't be on those chains, just EVM compatible.
Okay, and here is the last question, I think. And also, people, as I mentioned earlier, like, don't forget to join, make your own research. Okay, yeah, here is the last one. So, give me find out. Okay, can you explain states more interesting flexibility?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, one of the flexible. So, I want to compare this for a second to something called Lofty. So, maybe some people have heard of Lofty or Lofty.ai. This is a platform that was selling fractional ownership of housing, of mostly of rental properties. So, it's a bit similar to what we're doing, because what we're doing for boats that produce a profit by catching fish, or fish cages or floating houses that are being rented out. I guess that's the most similar example, right? If we're collateralizing our token by with floating houses that are then being rented out by these beach resorts, then what Lofty was doing is they were collateralizing their tokens, or their NFTs, with regular land-based real estate that's also being rented out with rental properties. But the issue, I believe, and it's been a while since I've looked at Lofty, but my understanding is once you buy their fractional NFTs, you can't just pull them out and take them to Uniswap and sell them. So there's a lack of flexibility. There's a lack of liquidity in their platform that I see as an issue. And I think that we've corrected that in the sense that any project that you support, whether or not you contribute funds to a fishing boat or a fish cage or a floating house or anything else, you receive the same Stead token as compensation. You are buying a Stead token. That one token is not backed by an individual floating asset. Like if a single boat sinks and I'm holding fractional ownership of that boat, then my fractional ownership of that boat goes to zero because that boat sank. So how do we diminish risk? How do we reduce risk? We do it by saying that every token that you're holding is collateralized by every floating asset on the platform. So the risk is spread out, is the first thing. That's the first benefit. The second benefit is that you can then take those tokens. They're completely interchangeable. They're totally fungible. So you can take them to Uniswap and sell them for USDT, and there's always going to be buyers because it's not a fractional NFT. It's not a fractional mortgage. It's more fungible than that. That's the kind of flexibility that I think our system allows, that is an advantage over some of the other real world asset platforms that are focusing on real estate. So whereas they are offering a lack of flexibility and they're focusing on land-based real estate, we're focusing on water-based real estate, which is actually usually more profitable than land-based real estate. I don't know if people realize this, but usually tuna fishing boats generate considerably more profit than rental homes. I know that might be surprising, but tuna all over the world, tuna is a very, very valuable asset. It's a very good resale value. But anyways, so yeah, that's probably the biggest thing we're doing in terms of flexibility and also risk mitigation, is making the tokens fungible, making them collateralized by a basket of assets rather than a single asset. It both insulates you from risk and allows you to simply sell the token whenever you want, but you can't do that with something like Lofty or a lot of these other fractional NFT platforms. You can't just go and sell your NFT easily on Uniswap. It doesn't work that way.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you for your comment. I think we covered everything. But people, if you have any more question and query regarding the project, you can ask through their social media link actually. So learn more and stay safe. So thank you for your comment, both of you. Have a great day. And also, like anything else to share, like you think we didn't cover in the previous part. So anything else to share once again?
The only thing that I would point out, I mean, I feel we've covered our platform pretty well, but I just want to let people know, for those that are listening, that we do have a wait list. If you go to our website, which is stead.builders, and you sign up to our wait list, then you'll be asked to give your name and your email. And before launch or around the time of our launch, there's going to be certain benefits for people that are on that wait list. So I just want to let people, make people aware that it would benefit them to be on that list. So take a look at our website, stead.builders, sign up to our wait list. You won't regret it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you for everyone, and thank you. Like I'd like to thanks guys. Support them actually. Community is everything. So they need your support and stay tuned. So thank you everyone. Have a great day and best wishes to your project for the future. Hope for the best.
Thank you for your time, Austin.
Yeah. Good day. Goodbye.